What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Five Pod, episode number 76. I, of course, am your co-host, Kyle Morello, and next to me, the one and only Jake Copestick. Cope, it's been a tiny little bit. How we doing?
Yeah, it has been a little bit. We're doing well. Kind of busy with stuff. I'm sure we both are. You got soccer season coming up. Um, it's almost March. It's
Yeah,
dude, it's flying. It's flying, and we're almost here.
Cope, we're
So
about
if
2 weeks.
you're not locked in right now, I think you're left behind. Sorry, I don't think there's any catching up you can do. But yeah, doing well. Got some snow today. That was pretty interesting. I think this is the
Yeah.
biggest snow we've had in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of overall in the winter, yeah, definitely. But yeah, Cope, like you said, March is fast approaching, fast approaching, um, which is pretty crazy. But we're going to get right into everything Big Five related. First, before your quick hitters, we have a quick content announcement for you guys. We are switching up our content schedule a little bit. We're going to go to one episode a week now on Wednesdays, just so we have a little bit more quality over quantity for you guys. We definitely want to make sure we're doing the best job we can. Not to say that we're not doing the best job we can when we do it 2 times a week, but we can definitely get more preparation, more analysis, more things packed into one episode as opposed to stretching ourselves a little thinner over two. So, and it fits our schedules a little better currently. Cope, I know you're on a new work schedule. I've got the season coming up for the union. So it's just going to be better for everybody, but we definitely want to make sure we're doing right by you guys. So, going to be one episode a week on Wednesdays now. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. Um, and Cope, first time in a little bit, we've had some quick hitters. Why don't you take it away with just one quick hitter today, but it packs a punch. Get that ball ready. Let's go.
Oh, it sure does. I would say this quick hitter actually lacks a pun.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, just Colts quick hitter today, just one. But on the day of this recording, 30 years ago, the infamous John Chaney clip saying that he would quote unquote kill John Calipari and kick his ass post game after a heated Temple UMass game in which John Calipari was berating the officials. John Chaney vehemently disagreed with that, said that he was berating three class guys and was giving them a hard time, and they had to be separated in a post game press. So, um, obviously, rest in peace to Coach Chaney, the best to ever do it. Diversity, and probably one of the more entertaining clips you'll ever see in a press conference. They can be very mundane, a lot of coach speak. Not often you see two coaches almost fight each other in the press conference room in front of a lot of people there. So yeah, an all-time clip there. But good to see after the fact. I saw a clip today that said that John Calipari was actually at John Chaney's funeral. Good to see that they put that behind them. And a very heated moment at one point was something that two all-time great coaches could once laugh about. Yeah. But yeah, how about that? 30 years ago today, I saw it everywhere. Everybody was posting it. John Chaney and John Calipari almost getting into it. You said it packs a punch. Almost happened. Almost happened. And if it wasn't for a packed room, they probably would have been throwing some fists. That's the only quick hitter we have today. Maybe a bit of a history lesson, not really much of a quick hitter. It's like news. Bit of a Big Five history lesson down memory lane. Probably one of the more infamous clips. I would even say in Big Five history. I feel like when you think of John Chaney, you think of that. Even when you think of Calipari and his time in UMass, like with all the success he had in Marcus Camby and deep tournament runs like that, that's a pretty infamous clip as well. 30 years ago today, Kyle, I don't know where the time goes. I was far from being, I was not even close
I was
to
gonna
being
say
on the
we
CERN yet.
weren't alive for a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Cope. This first of all, obviously you rarely see that kind of outburst in a press conference anywhere, but especially you don't see a coach going into another coach's press conference and rushing him like that. So that was crazy. And listen, the stakes were extremely high in this game. I'm trying to look up exactly where each team was ranked right now, but I believe both of those teams were ranked, I want to say in the top 10, conservatively, if not the top five, in 1994. Both were A10 powers. So this game was crazy that UMass won 56-55 on 2/13/1994. So, yes, rest in peace to the legend John Chaney. But 30 years ago today, man, that was a day in the Big Five, let me tell you. All right, Cope, we're gonna do this a little bit differently now that we switch into a Wednesday schedule. We're not gonna be able to go over every single game like we had been doing 2 times a week, but we're gonna zoom out a little bit. We're gonna go over some more bigger picture things with each team going forward. Now, of course, we will still go over some details of each game, of course, but we're going to start with Villanova Wildcats as our first team to put a little bit of a microscope on, although I guess not as zoomed in as I was just referring to. After their win against Providence a couple weeks ago, or I guess a week and a half ago now, they lost to Xavier 56-53. And I think, Cope, the main thing about that, which I'll let you get into, was the well, we'll call it ugly final sequence at the end of that game where Villanova tried to get a shot off the tie, and they did not, which definitely led to some hellstorm on Villanova Twitter. But then they bounced back nicely. They blew out Seton Hall on Super Bowl Sunday, 80-54. They had four players in double figures, led by Eric Dixon with 18. They shot over 53% from the field, over 46% from three. Uh, they had led Seton Hall to 15 turnovers, even though they were out rebounded. No, I'm sorry. I meant to say that Seton Hall shot 40 and 30% respectively from the field. Um, and bigger picture too as well, Cope, which I'll let you talk about here. Joe Lunardi, ESPN bracketologist, who we all know and love, has Villanova as their next four out as of the day of this recording, February 13th. So Cope, they're still alive. They are on the outside looking in. Got one win against a team that's also on the bubble. Got a loss against a team that's also around there too. Obviously, the 5-game losing streak before that didn't help, and we've talked about that. We don't need to get into that again. But as of right now, one, do you think Villanova has what it takes to maybe win against some teams that they shouldn't at this point because they're going to have to be able to get into the tournament? And two, what do you make of these two very, very interesting and very different results here over the last week?
It's hard to tell because look, as good as a win as Seton Hall is, they're not a top tier team like a Marquette or a UConn that's really going to be a needle moving win for you. Um, and unfortunately, Kyle, like as much as we love to talk about how good the battle for Atlantis was, like that seems like it was forever ago. We're in a totally different season now. Justin Moore is not is look, he's battling, he's fighting like hell out there, but he's even admitted that he's not 100% healthy. So you have to deal with that. His scoring production isn't there. But I will say this defense is how they're gonna if they're gonna make the tournament, that's what it's gonna be. They're gonna have to be a very, very good defensive team. In the last three games, they have showed that. With the Providence game, the Xavier game, and the Seton Hall game, they've shown how good they can be defensively. And look, the offense isn't going to be there all the time. That's been apparent in a bunch of games for them. But defensively, the way they're locking up, you look at the last two games I put at Wells Fargo Center against Providence and Seton Hall that are kind of hanging around the bubble. I mean, those are two ass whoopings. Like these aren't even close games. They've just dominated these wire to wire. So picking up a win over the Hall is huge. With them kind of lingering around the bubble, you kind of have Providence, Xavier, Seton Hall, and Villanova that are all kind of hanging around the very edge of the field, whether that's on the good or the bad side of the bubble. But defensively, what they've seen and honestly what they've been for a good chunk of the year, Kyle, like they have what it takes defensively to get there. They do. But offensively is where this is going to come from. And I think that people still have their doubts about Neptune. There was a lot of, listen, the last possession at Xavier, like, really is inexcusable. He had a timeout. They had 18 seconds left. They ran a good set. They had Hausen basically get like a down screen off the weak side and then get a side elevator. I'm pretty sure Kansas State had just run the same play in overtime. It was either in overtime against Kansas at K-State or it was late in regulation to get the game to overtime. They had just run the same play. It was a really good idea. It was to get like Hausen, like they were trying to get him a look, and it was a really good idea to try and get him that. But Xavier defended it perfectly. And like Neptune had enough time to call a timeout here. And even if there's only 5-6 seconds left, like catch your breath and draw something else up. Xavier really did a good job having to defend for 20 seconds and not even letting Villanova get a shot. That was a pretty spectacular display of defense. Davion McKnight got through the elevator screen, didn't give Brandon Hausen a look, but did not get a shot up high. and have 20 seconds to do it is inexcusable. It really is. Especially for a team in a program like Villanova. That cannot happen. But they responded well, which is really good to see. And they did it over a team that's at least, I believe, their last 14 men right now. Seton Hall is. For that to happen is big for them. But yeah, they're gonna go to Providence. They're gonna go to UConn. Like they gotta get an outlier win here. They do. Um, Tomorrow's Valentine's Day, which is when Mike DeCourcy says like that's when wins can feel like they're enough to propel you in, and every loss is crushing. And although I said Villanova doesn't get that luxury, they have to start doing it now. Now we're really into that last phase. There's only a couple games. They might have 7, 8 games left. You have to like it has to happen now for them defensively. That's where they're gonna get in. But offensively, they have to figure this out. Jordan Longino's been he hasn't been as good as he has been earlier in the season, coming off his injury, and then with Justin Moore, with his injury, other people have to step up. But Brendan Housen, how about how good he's been the last couple of games?
Yeah.
He's gonna be huge for them. So gonna be interesting, but it's good to see that they're not completely free falling here. They're still fighting like hell, and they're still hanging around. They still have a chance. Defensively though, they have to lock in on that, and they have the last couple of games.
Yeah, and Cope, that like you said, that's 100% the key because if their shots aren't falling, the only way they're going to stay in games is if they lock in defensively. And if they get their mojo back on that end, which they have been, I'm not saying they haven't, they absolutely have been, as you mentioned, especially those last 3 games. But, some nights the shots will fall, some nights the shots won't. What can be there 100% of the time is the defensive intensity. That can always be there. So no matter how you're doing an offense, they have to lock in defensively. And that's going to be their way to try to get into this tournament. There's still an outside chance. It's not completely over yet, but like you said, now that the calendar's turning to Valentine's Day and we're inching closer toward March, we're only 2 weeks away now, it's time to put up or shut up. And, if they don't win some of these games, unfortunately, those losses are going to keep mounting, like you mentioned, and they're going to be on the outside looking in once again. So, like I said, it's put up or shut up time for them. They now won 2 of 3, which is good, but arguably should have been 3 of 3 at Xavier. And now it's go time for them. So we will see what happens there. And I'm sure we'll talk about one of their games later. So stay tuned for that. All right. Here we go now. We're going to move on to St. Joe's Cope. They also had a very interesting week. They lost to number 18 Dayton, 94-79 at home, a game in which they led by 4 at halftime. And then Cope proceeded to let up 60 points in the second half. How you do that, I am not entirely sure. We are going to get into it, though. They shot Dayton almost 57% from the field, 54.5% from 3. You had Anthony Grant yelling into the stands, I think multiple times. You had some Dayton players at the end of this game yelling at some fans. This was a hectic, crazy environment at Hagan Arena. And then they were back there on Saturday where they won an absolute thriller against St. Louis, 87-86. The Browns combined for 50 points, Xavier having 27 and Cameron having 23. In this game, they shot nearly 44% from the field, 35.5% from 3. They made SLU turn the ball over 22 times. They did lose the rebounding battle 40-30, but this stretch here for St. Joe's is very interesting. And Cope, I think we should talk about the Dayton game more right now because that win would have been an extremely impressive one. I know it was at home, which, as we mentioned in the last episode, the last time that they beat a ranked team was Dayton at home. So this was a game where they had it. They were playing well. They played some of their best basketball they played all year in that first half. And then they probably played the worst basketball that they played all year in the second half, letting up 60 to the Flyers. I mean, there's a lot you can get into in this game, Cope, but what is the one thing that sticks out to you?
Just how dominant Dayton was in the second half. I mean, they completely took away the crowd in the second half, and it was just a completely dominant performance. And yet, in effect, DeRon Holmes looks like he's going to run away with 8-time Player of the Year. potentially be a first team All American. He made 4 baskets in this game, Kyle. He only had 13 points, which when he averages almost 20, you'll gladly take it. All 4 dunks. So it's not like he destroyed them offensively, but you look at they shot over 50% from three. Nate Santos had 19 of his 21 in the second half. He dominated this game. He was making threes. He had a couple baskets off putts. He had and one drive into the basket. Like they just got shredded everywhere. Um, it was just an unbelievable second half. I mean, defensively, they were putting up bad shots. Eric Reynolds, 6 points in this game. Kyle broken almost 40 game streak where he scored at least 10 plus points. Just seemed like he was forcing. Um, and look, he's gonna put up shots. I mean, he's their best player. That's what he's gonna do. But it just seemed like he was forcing some very very tough looks that Dayton was making very tough. So a mixture of St. Joe's going very cold, but also like Dayton showed why they're the class of this league, why they're a ranked team. I mean, this was just a dominant performance, Kyle. Like it was after the first half the Joes had, they knocked down some threes to start. I said, "Oh, they're hot." I had said that I think it's a game where they're going to come out, they're going to be juiced up to play, and the threes are going to be falling. It looked like that early, and then Anthony Finkley got ejected.
Yeah.
Reynolds had the game that he did and just couldn't make anything. Was 2 for 11 in this game, 1 of 8 from three. And I was like, okay, they're going to play Kasper Patrick a little bit. Sean Simmons going to get some minutes. They played 6 guys, and X Brown played 30 minutes in this game. But man, that was a dominant performance by Dayton in the second half, Kyle. Dominant. I mean, they had come back and they had a big run to tie the game and then take a small lead in the first half, but just a complete run of dominance that was A10 regular season and tournament champ, like just sweeping both like good. It was these are two teams. St. Joe's is a good team. They're in the upper half of this league, but Dayton is in a tier by themselves pretty much. Regardless of what the standings say, with them having 2 losses at Richmond and VCU. Wow. Just an incredible second half. They had a bunch of guys scoring double digits, a lot of different guys that could hurt you. Even they're doing this without Malachi Smith, who got hurt in the first game or very early in the season. Oh, just a dominant performance by Dayton. I can't emphasize it enough. It's just like it looked like it was a different team in the first half. It looked like they went into I don't know if they switched their shoes or something. It looked like it was 2 different teams. Not that they didn't play well in spurts in the first half, but they just completely took the crowd out of the game, and it was just an absolute domination in the last 20 minutes. I mean, to score 60 points on the road in the second half and to put up 94, holy smokes, man! That was one of the best halves I saw anybody play all year.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I mean, they showed why they are the sole ranked team in the conference, and why they're being put on like the 3 or 4 line right now in bracketology. I know the loss to VCU probably wouldn't help, won't help that cause, but like they're consistently being talked about as, at least a 4 seed. This team is really, really good. And I know we've talked about St. Joseph's quality too. They competed with Kentucky earlier in the year, although I am very much not sold on Kentucky whatsoever, but it's a discussion for a different day. Um, they compete with some really good teams, but they've also showed that side where they can just lapse at every moment. And it's a little concerning for a team that had tournament aspirations going into the year and still has them to this day. I mean, they're sitting at 16-8 overall, 6-5 in the conference. They're 3.5 back of first place. And they're tied for fifth. They have a tiebreaker over UMass, but like this team is still good, but that's just how Dayton's just on a complete whole other level. Um, and like you said, they might not be technically leading the conference right now because Richmond's sitting at 9-1, and they're a very good team in their own right. But man, this Dayton team is special, and that's all I got to say about that. All right, we're gonna move on to a team that was leading their conference, unfortunately is no longer, and that would be the Drexel Dragons. They have suffered back-to-back road losses at UNC Wilmington, 75-56, and at Charleston, 80 to 70. Cope, they've now lost three of four. They sit at 8-4 in CAA. They're in sixth, but they're really tied for third. There's two teams at 9-3 in that conference. You got UNCW and Charleston, who we just mentioned, and then Delaware, Hofstra, Towson, and Drexel are all 8-4. So first of all, this conference is really, really tight at the top. I mean, this is like something we haven't seen in a little bit here, especially this year, honestly. Um, Now they've got games coming up against Hofstra, which we think we'll talk about, and against Campbell on Saturday. Uh, Cope, the Dragons, not been playing too well lately. They got off to that really, really hot start in CAA play. Now they're going to have to win these next couple games as they turn that calendar toward the last couple weeks of February. But these two games against UNCW and Charleston, I know they're on the road. I know those are now the two tie for the two best teams in conference play. But if you're Drexel fans, those are games, at least one of them, you would like to see to confirm those CAA championship aspirations. So what did you make of those two losses?
Yeah, well, they had to go play probably the two hardest places to play in the league, and to do it back to back against not only at the two hardest places to play, but the two best teams. And you look at the four losses they've had, Kyle, like I've mentioned a bunch of times, they've all come on the road. They've yet to lose a game at home. So um, it, I can't be like too overly concerned, I guess, because they did beat these teams. They beat UNC Wilmington at home. But look, it's hard to win on the road in conference play. UNCW is starting to separate themselves as well as Charleston. So I don't think you can get too caught up in it. I mean, it's actually a pretty good league. I mean, Hofstra is a good team as well. Hofstra could easily deal them their first home loss. But then you look at the Wilmington game, like Justin Moore just with a couple off games here, 3 of 14 in the USC Wilmington game, good for 11 points. Didn't even break in the Charleston game. So a couple of hard plays to play. Only 6 points for Amari Williams in the UNC Wilmington game as well. But hey, Trazarian White, 15 and 6, like we had mentioned, that was going to be a really tough place for them to go play. You had mentioned him probably having a good game. But yeah, he's really the key. He's still a young player, kind of been up and down. But for me, Justin Moore and your lead guard having really good games is what it's going to be all about for them. So kind of concerning because you want to see them. You want to see them play well against these top tier teams on the road. They've split with UNCW. The home team's won both times. So hopefully we get a rubber match of them in DC for the NCAA tournament. But not too concerned. It's just with it, the road losses kind of piling up is because you got to be able to win both. Got to be able to win away from home. It's not like there's a free fall going on here. They've hit a bit of a rough stretch. It's going to happen. I read a really good article from Jeff Nyberg from the Inquirer about Spiker with he picked up a golf ball. He's got a golf ball in his office, and he mentioned that all the indents on it actually make the ball fly farther than just having a round ball. And he mentions he kind of links that to dealing with adversity, stuff like that. Like you'll go farther once you deal with adversity, you deal with some losses. This is the first stretch they've hit in conference play, and the first stretch they've hit in quite some time in the season. So I think we'll be fine for now. You're going to hit some bumps here, but they split with UNCW. They split with the first place team right now. So that's all you can ask for, at least at the moment. It's not like there's a free fall going on. There's still time to separate themselves and get a double bye in conference play, or at least in the conference tournament. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely. I still think they're among the best three teams in the league. Unfortunately, right now the next tier of those teams is rising up. So you have what did I say? Four teams tied at 8-4 in the conference. Yeah, so they're a part of that right now, but I still think that they're better than Delaware, Hofstra, Towson. Um, and I think they will end up proving themselves again. But now's the time. They're hosting Hofstra, like we said, on Thursday. They're part of that mix there, so that's going to be a very interesting game. And then they have Campbell on Saturday, which I think they should win, but they cannot look past Campbell because we know what happens when teams look past these teams that aren't doing as well. So I don't think it's concerning. I just think it's something to note, losing 3-4, nobody ever wants to do. So, uh, definitely something to keep an eye on, but not be concerned about yet. If they lose these next two games, or maybe even one of these next two games, specifically the Campbell one, then we can have some concerns. But for now, uh, okay. Cope, unfortunately, we're gonna now go over three teams that there's concerns for, to say the least. We'll start with, I would say, probably the least concerning, which isn't saying a ton. Um, we're gonna go with LaSalle here. They did lose their two games since our last recording, including the night of this recording to Davidson 71-56. They also lost to league leader Richmond 82-65. Um, and listen, Cope, we've talked about it a bunch. We'll talk about it again. The bottom line is that they're just not shooting that great. They shot decent in the Richmond game, 46.6% from the field. 30 from three is not great. But then against Davidson, 37% from the field, 21% from three. Brantley led them in scoring both games. They never even led in the Davidson game. And now, Cope, they've lost 9 of their last 10. So unfortunately, this is very bleak here. Um, I don't have a lot to say. I don't know exactly where they go from here. They are toward the bottom of the Atlantic 10 settings. They're actually right now the basement of the Atlantic 10, sitting at 2-10. St. Louis is 2-9, so they have a game in hand on them. Um, but unfortunately, they're at the bottom here, and it's not good. It's not good at all. So I don't really know a ton what to say right now about this LaSalle team. I'll let you speak your mind, but it is not good right now for the Explorers.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of getting to the point of the season, Kyle, where you kind of are what you are. We've talked about the same issues with pretty much every team here.
Yeah.
It's not like we're getting a feel for these teams. We kind of know what's going on here. And offensively, again, it was brutal tonight. 4 of 19 from three, I believe it was. And they scored 56 points, and 36 came from Khalil Brantley and Deshaun Shepard, who Deshaun Shepard was scoreless in the last two games. So the scoring consistency has not been there. And then the shooting, like they're just not a good offensive team. And it's like, do they have the talent? Do they have the defensive ability to be able to win games like that? And that answer is no at this point. So I'm like they're in a free fall. They're lost 9 of 10 and five in a row. They just gave up 100 points at home to St. Louis. Like it's probably only going to continue to happen. They UMass, they have Bonaventure, they have three Rhode Island at home. Like hopefully they can pull one of those out. Um, they got a trip to Loyola Chicago coming at the end of March at their last game of the year. In March, but this is just what they are. They're in a free fall. Defense, they can't win a low scoring game. The only way they can win is when they make all of their shots, and they did that for the most part against St. Joe's, and they still lost. Like they just are what they are. They're not a good offensive team. Defensively, it's not good enough to win a rock fight if they really really have to. And they need good games from Brickus and Brantley. And if they don't, this is gonna keep happening, and it has been happening. So yeah, that there's not really much to say at this point. The same problems that they've had just keep plaguing them, and it's unfortunate they can't get a win here. I didn't think they would be a double bye candidate, but I also didn't think like they have one of the better backcourts in the whole league. I didn't think it'd be this bad. Um, but yeah, it's not good at all right now. And to be quite frank, like if they can't win 2 or 3 here in these next couple home games, they're probably staring down the barrel at that last seed. They're staring down the 15th seed in the Atlantic 10.
Yeah, that's pretty bleak, Cope. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's really bad. Um, I don't really have much to say outside of that. I mean, they're just unfortunately not a good basketball team, and I love Fran Dunphy. I think he's a great coach. I think if there was a different coach, this team would be even worse, to be honest. Uh, but they're just not a good team. They have a great backcourt, like you mentioned, but outside of that, there's a lot to be desired there. But I did notice this. Not that it has to do with LaSalle at all per se, but I'm looking at their schedule right now. Cope, it's very weird that they only have 6 games left on their schedule. It's very weird to look at.
Hmm.
Uh, we are very, very close to the best time of year. Well, we are in the best time of year, but you know exactly what I mean. Uh, yeah, it's just I just noticed that when I was looking at the results, and strange, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming up on it though. Believe that. All right, Cope, we are going to continue with the trend of Big Five teams in the basement of their leagues. Unfortunately, we're only now, after this mention, 2/3 of the way through. So who's next? That would be the Temple Owls. They lost two actually close games against two of the better teams in the league at home. 84 to 77 against Memphis, and then 83 to 80 against Charlotte. Cope, like I said, two close games. Actually, that Memphis game, they were down 20 in the first half, if not more, and they came back. They made it a decent game, but ultimately Memphis prevailed on Thursday, and then they did lose 83 to 80 against Charlotte as well, who was among the leaders of the conference. But Cope, the Owls are 1-10 now. They are good for dead last in the American. And same thing with LaSalle. At this point, I really just do not have a lot to say. We, of course, going to keep covering them because we are committed to bringing you guys all the best coverage of all the Big Five teams. However, it is very, very tough to talk about at this point with those two teams and Penn, which we're going to get into in a second, although they at least have something hopeful to look forward to, which we'll get into as well. But Cope, it's just bad. It's just bad. I have nothing else to say about it. At least they competed. At least they are competing in these games against, two of the better teams in the conference. But man, is it rough right now for Temple.
Yeah, and another thing, if you want to talk about things that have consistently nagged teams, like you talked about LaSalle's lack of offense, I mean, Temple just can't close out any games. Look at their last handful here. So they lose on the road by double digits to North Texas and SMU. Lost at home to Rice by 3. Lost at home by South Florida to 6 that we were at, and they blew a lead. They were winning
Yep.
that game. They blew a lead to East Carolina on the road, lost in overtime by 6. The next game, they go to Tulane, they keep it close, they run out of gas in overtime, and they lose. 7-point loss to Memphis, a 3-point loss to Charlotte, who's first in the league right now. They just can't, or excuse me, one game back. They just lost, they just dropped one. But they were at one point they were leading the conference. They went over FAU. They just can't close out games, unfortunately. I like Zion Stanford's been getting more minutes, and he's been scoring. Um, but like they just can't close out games. That's all there is to it. Not really much else to say there. I mean, they're quite frankly like they're just not very good either. I mean, it's the and I've said this so many times. It's like beating 10 dead horses at this point. But a first time head coach who's one of the latest people to fill a job, who was no retention basically of former players, at least ones that were impactful and played a lot of minutes besides Hysier Miller and Jaleel White. And that was, they lost 4 or 5 other key contributors. Had to throw together a roster basically of transfers. You only bring in one true freshman that you had to keep in the previous administration. Like there's a lot that was working against them this year. It was, and you're starting to see that like put on display. They started out hot. It was great. People were excited. They got to the Big Five championship. They started out 3-0. That's great. But from there, like they can't close out games. They've blown a couple leads to good teams. Like they almost beat South Florida, who's first right now. They had them on the ropes at home. They were playing better than them for most of that game, and they lost it at the end. A win over at Tulane would have been huge. Almost had a win over Charlotte, who's second place in the league. They're feisty. They just can't close them out. And how many times have we said that this year? They just are. They are at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's as we always say, it's unfortunate to see. But as you mentioned, they are what they are at this point. And like I said, we'll keep talking about them, but not much is changing. They are going to be, if not dead last in the American, they're going to be among the bottom 3. Uh, it's just unfortunately what it's going to be. We're going to have to deal with it. Hopefully, Adam Fisher plays Zion Stanford a little more because I do want to see him get more tick as he grows as a player. Um, but besides that, like there's gonna have to be retooling and such rebuilding really in the off season. And that's we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it's at least they are competing in these games, I will say. Like it's a good sign to see. At some point, hopefully in Adam Fisher's tenure, they'll figure out a way to be able to close these games out. But right now, this is a learning experience for them. So that's what we can draw to as a learning experience. Cope, finally, we have another team that is tied for last in their conference. That would be Penn Quakers, who are now 1-6 in Ivy League play, excuse me, tied with Dartmouth for last after their 77-70 loss at Princeton on Saturday. Cope, you were there for this one. I'm going to let you take it away, but I will say one thing that is a positive. Clark Slacker was back, played 36 minutes, only 10 points, 4 of 11, but when you miss nearly 2 months, you're going to ease back into it. So at least he's back. They kept it close against a really good team. But unfortunately, they fell there. But I'm not going to speak anymore because you were there and you saw it. So I'm going to let you take it away, Cope. What did you see in this one?
So it really is unfortunate that Slacker had to miss that much time because they were winning against this team at halftime. Penn has one win this year in Ivy League play. It's over Dartmouth. And they had a 16-3 team on the ropes for a good majority of this game. And especially that first half, they came out, were making a bunch of shots. Well, quite frankly, everybody was hitting shots. I feel like nobody could miss. It just sucks to see them play this well when, like, if they had Clark Slacker for all of Ivy play, they wouldn't be in this spot. They would not be. They would have had way more wins. Now look, there's still time. They have to split this weekend. They have a huge game coming up Friday against Yale. But it's unfortunate to see like how well they play. And shocker, you play better with your best player, but how much better they are offensively. And he's in there. Just kind of gives you a glimpse of what the season kind of could have looked like. But Nick Spinoza, big game, 19-14. But the best player in the court, Kyle Xavier Lee, who the NBA people are going crazy over, and rightfully so. 22 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, at 17 in the first half. Man, this guy, look, he's not a big guy. He's not a tall guy. He's not a guy you look at his body and you're like, damn, he's like a Greek guy. But my God, is that guy fast with the ball in his hands. And he's quick with dribble moves, the first step in getting by people. Like he's just a shifty, quick dude that can get to the bucket. And look, they played good defense on him in the second half. Got held to 5 points. Tyler Perkins was on him for a little bit. But when he can get by people and not only score, but then kick out the shooters as well for a team that shot 16-38 from three, Kyle, that's what the story is here. You're not really going to win. The only time you're going to win a game when your opponent shoots like that, if you match them or shoot better. 16-38, Kyle. They made 26 shots in this game. 16 of them came from behind the line for the Princeton Tigers. They're still very good, even with losing a guy like Tosan Uwomo, who's now playing in the NBA for the Memphis Grizzlies. The one thing about Princeton, kind of stylistically, is they lose a creator and a ball handler in Tosan, who is such a unique skill set for a big and really is a nightmare when you try to match up with them defensively. But there's one thing that Tosan couldn't do, Kyle, and that was shoot. So Zach Martini comes in. Princeton's one of the shortest teams in D1, by the way. They're sub 300 in average height. Zach Martini is not a big guy at all, but there's one thing that Zach Martini can do, and that's shoot. Can't do anything else that Tosan did, but that guy can shoot. So they can spread you out with 5 guys. So it's like, okay, we have a very quick guy in Xavier Lee. He can get to the basket. And guess what? If not, and you want to collapse the defense, everybody can shoot. And everybody's got a green light. And Blake Peters and Matalako have been there. They were on that team last year. Like and Caden Pierce had another good game too. Like everybody can shoot. Everybody's got a green light. And they don't play the bench really pretty like at all. Jalen Davis, who's a freshman, played some minutes in this game and had 1 basket. But besides that, they play those starters who were on that team last year. So another very, very good Princeton team. I think the world of Mitch Henderson, but 16-38, Kyle, 16-38 from the 3-point line. And if you're an analytics guy that's like shoot it at the rim or shoot a three, we probably love this team because that's what's happening here pretty much with them. So a really, really good Princeton team, a really, really good effort here from Penn, but 16 to 38 from three is crazy. It felt like they just didn't miss. It literally felt that way. Every time Princeton put up a three, I felt like it was going. They were getting pretty quality looks here too. I'm really looking forward to that game at the Palestra, which I believe is the last Ivy League game. Yeah, it's the last Ivy League game for both of them. I want to say, is it the 10th, maybe?
It is the
Um,
ninth.
the ninth, yeah. So it should make for a very good Penn Princeton rivalry, which I believe was the 248th meeting. I took a picture of the Palestra. You walk in the back doors of the Palestra, the scoreboard's right there. But then I saw Jaden Daly from Daily Dose of Hoops tweet out it was the 249th meeting, and that made me think, did they count the Ivy League tournament game this year? Because they
Maybe.
probably haven't in the past. I don't think they played each other. So I have to figure out what the exact number is. Maybe the people, I'll have to get the facilities guys to throw an extra number on there. But Prince started to close that gap, Kyle. They're starting to close that gap with Penn. But for one of college basketball's older rivalries, it was cool to be in the gym. Jadwin Gymnasium is a very cool gym, by the way. For sickos like me that like cool arenas and different spots. And there's half of it's indoor track, half is the basketball court. I think Jadwin's a pretty cool place to see a game. I'd recommend.
Yeah.
You get there if you're an Ivy League hoops or just a college basketball sicko like myself, and you're like me, I think you'd really enjoy Jadwin.
Yeah, we were there last year for the Ivy League tournament. It was a very, very cool, very, very cool place to watch a game, that's for sure. Yeah, Cope, I really, really wanted to go to that Princeton Penn game. Unfortunately, we have a home game, the Union against the Seattle Sounders on the ninth. So if you don't want to go to the Palestra, I would definitely say come on down to Subaru Park to catch us against the Sounders. But that's also going to be a very good one. And if you don't go, I'm going to be severely disappointed. I'll excuse you from the Union game for that one to go to the Palestra there. I think that's fair. But and potentially the 250th meeting if your numbers are correct. So that would be a big one. But yeah, Cope, I mean, it stinks what Penn season has turned into with Clark Slacker being out. But they're only two games out. I know they have how many games do they have? One, two, three, four, five, six, 7 games left. So it's gonna be tough to make up ground, but it's possible. Especially because, you know, or especially due to the fact that they play Yale, like you said, undefeated in the conference, but they play Brown, who's ahead of them. Um, they play Harvard, who's ahead of them. They play Cornell, Columbia, and of course Princeton again, like we just mentioned. So there's time. There's time, and then play Dartmouth, of course, who's tied with them too. But time's ticking. But Clark Slacker's back. Hopefully he can get back into game speed here. Hopefully this was a great test for him. I'm sure it was, being against one of the best teams in the conference. Uh, there's still a possibility for Penn. They just have to make that top four of the Ivy League to get into the Ivy League tournament, and then anything can happen, as we know. So we'll see what happens there. All right, Cope. We are going to go over some games to watch, and then we have a special topic to go over. So let's go over these games to watch a little quicker than we normally do. Of course, now that we're not just doing the weekend, we're doing the next week until we record again a week from now. So I jotted down 3 key games for us to watch. I'm gonna have you pick one. I'm gonna have me pick one, and of course, we'll mention the other one that we don't, but we're not gonna go over it per se. So, Cope, I'm gonna let you go first. What is your game to watch for the next week?
Oh, I'm actually going to deviate here from what you got. Ready for this?
Oh, okay. Let's
Yeah,
see.
I know. I see you have some games here, but I'm going to roll with Temple going down to Boca Raton and playing the Florida Atlantic Owls for the first time ever in AAC play.
Okay.
FAU currently ranked 24. They are one game out of first place, tied with Charlotte behind the South Florida Bulls, who they will believe they will see on Sunday at South Florida, which is a big game. And then one of my things I was looking forward to the most in terms of AAC play was seeing FAU and Memphis duke it out because they played a great first round game last year. But Temple going down to Boca Raton, this is not going to end well at all for them.
No.
They're probably going to get steamrolled in this game against a very good FAU team that, as we all know, is running it back pretty much with the basically same team as last year, sans Michael Forrest. But a very good team nonetheless. John L. Davis is a beast. He's one of the best players in the country. Elijah Davis is awesome as well. They have a big and Vladislav Bolden that is going to give Temple a lot of problems on both ends here, especially offensively. They don't have anyone that's going to be able to match up with him. So yeah, predicting a big game from FAU here. But look, if we look at the slate, there's one ranked team the Big Five is going to play this week, and that is going to be the Florida Atlantic Gallop. I see you have some game tier listed, but um, I'm going to go with FAU, the first ever AAC meeting, a very, very good team, one of the best teams that Temple is going to face off with all year, and a team that I think, although they've dropped some games, they lost. I don't know how the hell they lost to Bryant. I don't know how the hell they lost to FGCU. Don't know how they lost to UAB or Charlotte, but they have a win over Arizona. A bunch of other good wins as well, and they're going to end up seeing Memphis twice here as we get down the home stretch. So I'm going to say FAU and Temple, but going down there, FAU, you have these seniors and these older guys that they're starting to feel the urgency now. They're starting to play with some they've had some close games in conference play, but you know what I mean. We're getting close to the season ending. All they're thinking about is getting back to the tournament, making another deep run. I think they're very, very capable of. And I think, unfortunately, Temple is going to get caught in the crosshairs of a team that is playing at home, that's been in some games that shouldn't have been close, that dropped the game to UAB that they shouldn't have dropped, and they're going to take that wrath out on the Owls behind a bunch of shooters and a pretty dominant big guy. One of the, if not the best in the conference of Vladislav Golden.
Yeah, Cope. The reason I didn't put this game, even though I do think that is definitely interesting, that Temple's first time going down to Boca, their first matchup in AAC play, it's all great and all well, but they're gonna get smoked. I mean, that FAU team, even though they haven't been as hot recently as they did to start the year, they're a good team and they've been ranked all season pretty much, if not all season. And I don't think that's going to be a close game. So that's why I didn't put that on there. No disrespect to Temple, though they're gonna lose. They're gonna get blown out. That's what it is. Cope, some of the games I wrote down though, SJU at Loyola on Valentine's Day. I think that's gonna be an extremely good game in a 10 play. Obviously, St. Joe's looking for a little revenge there. We've got Villanova versus Butler, who Villanova also looking for revenge there on the 20th. That game's also going to be key because Villanova on the bubble, Butler's, looking to stay in as well. But Cope, the game I am going to go with is the one that we mentioned a little bit earlier in Coastal Athletic Association play. Got it right this time. We're going to go with Drexel hosting Hofstra on the 15th. And listen, Cope, this game is crucial for Drexel. Did I say Colonial or did I say Coastal? I definitely said Coastal.
Coastal. Yeah.
I got it right. I was second guessing myself, Cope. I got it right. Listen, this game is crucial for Drexel. Obviously, they've lost 3 or 4, like we mentioned. Hofstra is tied with them in the standings there in the CAA. But as we've also mentioned, Drexel undefeated at home. They're getting back there after a tough road trip. And this Hofstra team, while they are good, there's one mismatch that I'm very much looking forward to that I think will favor Drexel. And that, of course, is the rebounding. Cope, in the rebounding categories on KenPom, they are 337th in the nation in offensive rebounding percentage, and they are 250th in defensive rebound percentage, whereas the Dragons are 30th in offensive rebound percentage and 33rd in defensive rebound percentage. That is a ginormous discrepancy between these two teams. And as we talked about, of course, the rebounds create more second chances, which leads to more offense. And on top of that, what was I going to say? Drexel, while they're not a really great three-point shoot team in their own right, they defend it well, which is kind of the opposite of Hofstra. They do shoot the three-point pretty well. They're 50th in the country, but they don't defend it very well at 209. So that's something to look out for too, but I really think the rebounding advantage for Drexel will be huge in this one. And ultimately, I think it will lead them to a victory to get back on track here in the CAA and get them hopefully tied again at the top of the standings with Charleston and UNCW. So that was my game to watch. Cope, normally, this is where we wrap up our episode. I know it's been a little bit longer one this time. We've had a lot more to talk about, but we have something else to talk about too. It's a special thing. Not just Big Five related, but college basketball related, which of course we're Big Five fans. Obviously, we love the Big Five. We have a podcast talking about Big Five basketball. But first and foremost, Cope, we are college basketball fans. And there are some interesting developments potentially happening that will change the landscape of college basketball. So if those things are happening, we absolutely need to talk about it. So why don't we get into it? Put something on our Twitter about it earlier today. but there's a hope it looks like there might be a little bit of a college basketball super league in quotes kind of talk here. There's an article that came out from Yahoo Sports' Ross Dellinger about kind of these developments, and I'm going to break it down for you a little bit. I'm going to try not to take too much time, but these are essentially the spark notes of this article. The Big Ten and SEC on February 2nd announced a joint venture, which is kind of causing a little bit of ripple effect with the other power conferences, specifically the ACC and the Big 12. It says in the article that the expansion of the NCAA tournament seems inevitable, especially when you consider in the same breath in football that the college football playoff is expanded to 12 teams now starting next year. They're still debating whether it's going to be, six power conference, six, the group of six, or if there's going to be 5 and 7. That whole debate's still going on. That's for football. We don't need to talk about that. But this is the big discrepancy between the conferences we're talking about here. Projections show that the SEC and the Big Ten will earn double in annual conference distribution money than what the ACC and Big 12 are making. That, again, mostly related to football revenue, TV revenue, that is, but it's still something really, really significant that's going to impact these teams. And pretty much the bottom line is that for the expansion of the NCAA tournament, which is, I think, the biggest thing that we're going to talk about here, the leagues want to access more at-large spots, those power conferences, and they want to take some away potentially from the lower conferences. They were talking that article about maybe removing some of the automatic bids for the lowest level conferences and giving those at-large bids then to power conference teams who aren't necessarily that great. Like, for example, as relevant to us, this Villanova team in this scenario would probably get in to those kind of NCAA tournaments. So, Cope, this is crazy. Personally, we were talking about this right before we logged on here, and we wanted to save most of our thoughts for this, so this is genuine. I don't think the NCAA tournament really needs changing. They last changed it, I forget exactly how many years ago it was when they added the first four, and they made it 68 teams instead of 64. I think it's been about a decade now or so. The tournament's perfect. It has an insane amount of aura every year. You have the Cinderella teams from the lower and mid-major conferences that are competing with these high major conferences that get the best resources and supposedly the best players. And it makes for one of the biggest spectacles in American sports every single year. And everybody looks forward to those Cinderella stories, to those upsets, to everything else that comes with March Madness. And it would be an absolute disgusting thing if they took it away from these lower mid-major conferences. So that's my thoughts on it. I know we're probably going to talk a little bit more about it here in a couple seconds, but I want to get your thoughts on it. What do you make of this article and this potential talk of an NCAA Super League?
Yeah, so in terms of how it affects the NCAA tournament, everything about it sucks. Every single thing about it's horrible, and there's nothing good. I mean, they want to break off. I read something. I think it was Ohio State's president. Somebody wanted to talk with the NCAA to essentially break off like what you're saying with the Super League, and it's more concerned with football. You basically have like a 50 team like super conference of all the biggest brands, and they have to set up trusts to pay NIL money to athletes. You have to pay at least half of them $30K a piece. They have that type of money, whereas other schools don't. So they can break off, make their own rules, make their own decisions on TV deals, on how big your staffs can be, how much you can pay those staff members, like what a schedule would look like, what the playoff would look like if they want to further expand it to 16 teams. So this has to do more with football, which football should just break off and get its own thing.
Yep.
It is a money printing machine that should be its own thing. Every other sport should be played regionally. Brian Butcher said that last year. I think he's absolutely right. Let football be football, and don't have this conference realignment affect everybody else. Because when you're college basketball and you have to travel multiple times a week, like what if you're UCLA, you have to fly and you have to be at Rutgers, then you have to be at Penn State. Like you're just going to be gone for like almost a week. These kids are going to be in school, but that's totally besides the point. In terms of the NCAA tournament, it is perfect. Look at a bunch of other sports. NFL, they added a 7th playoff spot. The NBA has the play-in tournament in the playoffs where now the 9 and 10 seeds have a chance to be able to potentially play into the playoffs. MLB added another wild card spot. Am I wrong about that? Or
Yep.
They added
Correct.
that. College football. They're about to. First of all, they went away from East in the last 15 years. We went away from East from just the top two teams playing for the championship. Then we went to 4. Now it's about to be 12. There could be 16. This is the one postseason that is perfect. They made a minor alteration to it to add the first 4. And here's the thing, Kyle, there's been success. How many teams that the UCLA made a Final Four? LaSalle made a Sweet 16. You just said
BCU made a Final
FDU.
Four the first year.
Yeah, F Fairleigh Dickinson played in the 16 seed game against Southeast Missouri, and then they beat Purdue. And there's a success rate. I look at that, and I don't view that change as a negative because it's been a huge positive. And there's been success. You see a reason for it, just besides you get 2 more days of TV revenue. And it's not like this is college football where they're trying to take over like a whole month and dominate the sports calendar. Like this just gives college basketball 4 more games and 2 more days of national TV coverage. Casual fans love it. Casual fans will tune in, having watched no college basketball at all during the season. Everything about this is perfect. The only 2 things I think you changed, John Rothstein's been adamant about this, and I think this isn't a horrible idea, is if you win your conference, you deserve to be there. No matter if it's the NEC, the Southland, the Big Ten, SEC. If you win your conference tournament, you have earned the right to play in March Madness. So I don't believe you should have to play in. However, the 16 seeds, it gives them a little more exposure. They get to play another game because, more likely than not, they're just going to get the floor mopped with them when they have to go play the 1 seed. But I do think that if you win your conference tournament, you should not have to play an additional game. You should just be able to play. You're automatically in. And I think it actually would be more interesting to say, okay, the last 8 at-larges, you didn't win your conference tournament. I almost view that as like not so much a punishment, but like, hey, you're one of the last couple, handful of teams in. You're going to have to play an additional game. And you're going to have to play your way in. I do think that is a good idea. And then I saw Trilly Donovan say today that mid-majors should be banned from playing each other in the first round. You remember 2 years ago, this St. Peter's year, the 7-10 matchup to play St. Peter's in the second round was Murray State and San Francisco. Murray State was undefeated in OVC play. They had 2 losses all year to Auburn and to Memphis, I believe. And they had a bunch of guys that transferred up. Matt McMahon's at LSU now. Like, that was a team that I didn't want to see play San Francisco in the first round. You wanted Murray State, a mid-major that had been in the top 25 all year. I believe they were as high as 19. You want to see them go up against a power conference team. San Francisco, an electric backcourt with Khalil Shabazz and oh my God, what's his name? Damari Bouye and Khalil Shabazz, electric backcourt. You want to see them play against the power conference team. You don't want to see these mid-majors play against each other. The whole point is they get there, give them somebody, give them a big boy, let them prove themselves. Those are the only 2 things I would change about it. And if you told me no, I'm not that upset. It's perfect the way it is now. And the fact they're going to ruin it, they're trying to not give the bids. Here's a quote from the article. Ready? Read this on Yahoo today. ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips. We believe that the CFP and NCAA men's basketball tournament need the holistic look. We, by the way, meaning basically the 5 power conference commissioners and probably all the people in the athletic department associated with it. And then, in quotes, Brett Yormark, I believe is his name. I want to see the best teams competing for a national championship. No different than the Big Ten and SEC want to see in football. I'm not sure that's currently happening. So we should let the 13th team in the Big Ten get in that's 4 games over 500 that does not deserve to be there. It is a tournament that's hard to get to. That's the point. That's why people live and die with the bubble. It is hard to get to.
Well, then what the hell's even the point of the lower conference teams and some of the mid-major conference teams
You're not
playing
a
their
Cinderella.
season?
There's no point in them
What's
even
the
playing.
point?
Like it's totally ridiculous. There's no purity in anything anymore. These are just money-hungry people at the top that are just trying to service their member schools and make them even more money so they can continue to have all the shiny bells and whistles and pay for pay their staffs higher salaries and just kind of belittle the small schools. This is a completely ridiculous thing. They're going to ruin the only perfect postseason in sports, in my opinion. And the days of the Cinderella will be done then. You're not a Cinderella if you're a bottom-tier Big Ten team. Oh, they were one of the worst teams in the power conference, and they made the tournament. How'd they make the tournament? They basically just paid their way, and if you're going to expand it. You'll accept, like I saw somebody tweet out last year, if you expanded the tournament to 96, last year's St. John's team would have made it. Last year, St. John's, the only reason their record was that good is because they played a garbage non-conference schedule where they were, I believe, 11-1,
Yeah.
and the only loss they had was when they played Iowa State at Hilton, and they destroyed them because they actually played a real team. They were. Could you imagine an 18-15 team making the tournament, Kyle, as an at-large?
As an at-large, no, it
What
would
did they
be
do to get in?
absolutely
The only thing they
ridiculous.
did to get in was being in a power conference. That's the
It's
only
essentially
thing
like
they did.
Cope. It's like that Georgetown team a few years ago under Pat Ewing that ran the table in the Big East tournament and they won the tournament. Now, granted, they won the Big East tournament; they should be allowed in. But
Mm-hmm.
imagine that team loses in the Big East championship game, right? They're not a tournament team. That team was
Mm-hmm.
500. I forget exactly what their record was, but they were like around 500. I want to say they were 17 and 16. Like in this scenario, that team is a tournament team. They might be toward the bottom of those at larges that get in, but like in that scenario, that team's a tournament team as an at large. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to
Yeah,
see that. They want to see the 11 seed VCU team that nobody's even heard of that runs the table, beats number one seed Kansas in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four. People want to see the 11 seed, and we're going to continue with the A10 trend, George Mason team that goes all the way to the Final Four and plays UConn. Like those are the teams people want to see. They want to see St. Peter's making it to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight, actually, excuse me, after beating Purdue and Kentucky and I forget exactly who they played before in
They
between
played
that.
Murray State.
Murray State, thank you. Like you just mentioned that too. That was so dumb. But like people want to see that. People want to see Fairleigh Dickinson. They want to see the Florida Atlantic team that made the run last year. I know they were an 8 seed and they probably would have gotten it anyway, but like,
Murray State.
yeah, exactly. Like these are the teams that people want to see. They don't want to see a 17 and 16 Georgetown team that has no business being there. I know they won the Big East that year and they earned that, but like imagine if they had lost that. Nobody wants to see like you mentioned before this when we were talking briefly, a 19 and 15 Ohio State team that lost in the first or second round of the Big Ten tournament. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody.
Nobody
Maybe those
cares.
fan bases do. Maybe the commissioners of those leagues do because it's making them money that those teams are going to be on TV and in the NCAA tournament. Maybe those teams will win a game or two in the NCAA tournament and they'll get lucky, but those teams aren't deserving just because they play in a high major conference. They're already getting all the resources that these other teams aren't getting. They already have the nice facilities. They have, you know, the NIL money now. Now that's actually more relevant in the last few years than it had been in previous years. Like, if you can't perform with all these things, I don't care how good the rest of your league is too, that also might have access. They don't deserve to be in there.
Mm-mm.
And it
Nope.
takes away from the sanctity and the just the charm of the NCAA tournament. And the reason why people love it in the first place is because of the Cinderella and the possibility that a UMBC can go up against the number one overall seed in Virginia and beat them. You don't
Yeah.
get that in these other scenarios.
No.
Like,
No. Yeah. You want those teams you've never heard of. It just takes away everything that's great about it. Why we love it. And
hope
also, shout
you
out
don't
to
get Thomas Walkup.
yeah. You don't get teams
We
like
love
that.
Thomas Walkup.
You don't get teams like that. You don't get random like stars who burst on the scene, and you don't get Doug Edwards and stuff like that. You don't get teams like and moments like that. Shout out to Big 5+1. They said they will organize the sit-in if there is to be change. And I just want to
We'll be
say that
there.
I will. We have his back. We're their back. And if I need to show up to Indianapolis with some picket fence signs, I will show up at the NCAA law offices like I'm the one that's owed a new contract if this is the case. I will raise hell and move mountains to make sure this doesn't happen. Shame on all these Power Five commissioners. All they want's money. They don't give a shit about us. They don't give a shit about the fans. They don't care about anything. All they want to do is line their pockets and their members. Shame on them for this, but it's coming, Kyle. I hate to say it. The noise has not died down for this. It's only gotten louder. But shame on everybody that's trying to do this. Shame on everyone that's trying to ruin the best thing in sports that just wants money, but nothing to care anymore. It sucks that this happens, but are you surprised by these people? They don't actually
No.
care. They don't care about sports or the pageantry or any of that shit. They just want to line their money and say, "Oh, well, it's a business." That's all they give a shit about.
Yeah. There's nothing pure anymore, Cope. We used to build things and
Nah.
we no longer do. Hopefully gets treated like a situation where the the football Super League, I don't think I'm actually calling it right, but where all those Champions League and great European teams wanted to join forces and everybody was, outcrying about it and they got shut down. I hope something like that happens, but I doubt it because like you said, they care about lining their pockets and this isn't Europe. This is America where unfortunately this thing happens a little more often than over there. I know obviously it's different. Those college athletics are not nearly the same as over here, but I, knock on wood, I'm praying that somehow this does not happen, but hope this is, like you said, where we're going. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to keep an eye out for it. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in the next 5 years or so, I'll say. Um, but nothing is pure anymore. And it's disgusting. And if there's ever any kind of protest of any kind, I would love to be a part of it. I know you would too. So
We'll put
that's
it on the Big Five podcast company card to get us out there.
Cope. I don't know whose card that is, but we'll figure it out.
It can be in mine. It will be worth it. If we stop this
It will
from
be worth
happening,
it.
it will be worth it. But
100%.
before I'm going to shut up before I get any more upset about this.
Me too. Me too. But on a more positive note, we do want to thank you all for tuning into the Big Five Pod, as always. I know we rant sometimes about these things, but they are very important things. So we appreciate you guys listening to us. If you'd like to continue to listen to us, make sure you like to subscribe our YouTube channel. Make sure you listen to our audio only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, make sure you check out all of our social medias, which is only two, on Instagram and Twitter at Big Five Pod. Cope, any last thing before we go real quick?
Nope. Nope. Because then one thing's going to steamroll into the
I
other.
know,
So
I know. I
I'm
just
going to
had to
say no
ask.
for now.
I just had to ask. But for Jake Copestick, I'm Kyle Morello. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, as always, and we'll see you next week.